Up next, Dark Reading welcomes Daniel Bohannon, Principal Threat Researcher of Permiso Security, to the news desk. Daniel explains his briefing demonstrating obfuscation, deobfuscation, detection, and LDAP. I got behind my teleprompter. LDAP from lightweight to heavyweight. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to need a little help here, if you don't mind. Can you explain to me that what is transforming LDAP from lightweight to heavyweight mean?
Yeah, great question. So it's kind of a mouthful of a title, I will acknowledge. I'm kind of known to come up with titles of things that are difficult to pronounce, and it makes me happy that other people have to struggle with it as much as I do.
Yes.
So LDAP is a lightweight directory access protocol. Basically, it's a way that people can issue queries to get information out of Active Directory and those kinds of services. So our whole research focus was, as a defender, I'm always looking for opportunities to know how are defenders detecting things attackers are doing. And obfuscation is the whole realm of saying, can I do something that looks different that still accomplishes the same goal, right? So like just how kids these days will speak in code, you don't know what they're saying. It's like pig Latin, right? So if we can kind of enumerate all those possibilities, as defenders we can get ahead of what is like grammatically possible in a language. And so we chose LDAP for our language for this research, and it was a lot of fun.
And so walk me through how an attacker would use obfuscation in this environment.
Yeah, exactly. So an attacker, let's say there's lots of open source tools that people will use that issue LDAP queries to get information for reconnaissance, for initial, just kind of getting your bearing for when you compromise the system. And
what can they tease out of Active Directory? Like, what's the worst case scenario information they can get out of there?
So identifying, domain admins, things with what are called service principal names for Kerber roasting. Lots of, again, I'm actually not a red teamer, so if you have red teamers asking them the same question, I'll be sure to listen to their answers. But there's lots of known things that red teamers will go for in Active Directory. There's lots of open source tools that they can just point, click, run, and it gets all that information. These tools are running the exact same queries. It's open source, so as defenders we can see, oh, it's this exact query with these attributes and a couple things. So the fingerprint is very, very specific, it's rigid, it's very high fidelity for detections. As defenders, we can get lured into thinking we've written detections that cover this technique. Well, the language is more flexible than we might think. The LDAP query filter language itself has a lot more flexibility, and that's what we try to enumerate in our research, to say, let's understand all the ways we can twist and bend this language so that we can look for evidence of obfuscation. Because
okay.
So obfuscation, like if I were to show you a simple LDAP query, if you've never seen it before, and I were to show you an obfuscated LDAP query, you would say, that one is unhealthy, right? Because the human mind can really quickly see this is not a normal looking thing. But when you have millions or even billions of these things flying around, getting the right ones in front of human eyes is very difficult. So we wrote a parser for LDAP to do all this obfuscation and deobfuscation, but also to write detection. So our goal is, if you have millions and billions of search filters flying around in LDAP, pump those through this tool, and it will tell you and score those and say, hey, this one is very obfuscated, or it exhibits these techniques that are not normal in LDAP queries. So we're trying to reduce, as a funnel, reduce all this data down to just a very small number that are scored in a way that you can actually say, this one is very suspect, I want to do something about this.
How widely used is LDAP? Like, is this everywhere? Where is it deployed?
It is essentially everywhere. Any company of size that has any kind of, Active Directory is Microsoft's application that implements or compliant with LDAP. There are like Open LDAP is an open source version, but most large companies have some kind of directory service in general. So that part is pretty much everywhere. The challenging part is, as defenders, the visibility isn't nearly as ubiquitous. If you think of I come from a very endpoint and network heavy security background, so there's tons of event logs, there's aftermarket open source things you can add on like Sysmon and all these things. When it comes to LDAP, there's really nothing like that. There's a few open source tools that people can have in lab environments, but they say, do not push this to production, like this will take down your server. So like we're kind of confined to like one or two large vendors that provide this for a very expensive offering as part of their other security stack. But it's kind of I wouldn't call it a blind spot, but you have to have a lot of money to put on glasses to be able to see it in the first place.
Who are the main vendors in that space?
Microsoft is the main one I'm familiar with.
Sure.
So like Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Identity, those are two that get the kind of client-side, server-side visibility. I've been told some other EDR vendors have visibility, but not in a way that you can actually view all the queries. They'll just tell you if they see something interesting, but now you're placing your trust in their rules, and what if you have good people on your team that want to go through that data? It's not there.
Is there a larger awareness that this is a blind spot, like you say? Are teams aware that they can't see what's going on in there, or is this a blind spot that they're not even aware that they have?
People who know about it, I feel like they understand. People who know about it probably only know about it because they have those tools that give them visibility. So like if you were to search for threat hunting malicious LDAP queries, 9 out of 10 of the blogs you're going to find are going to be people like using one of these products saying, here's how we can hunt through and look at this stuff. But I think if I'm being completely honest, a lot of people probably have bigger fish to fry. Like if you don't have visibility into your process executions, like do that first. Like forget LDAP. Like I think there's other things people need to get to first. And if you've covered all those bases, you probably already have one of these big products that is going to give you that visibility.
So where does LDAP fall on the hierarchy of cybersecurity needs? Where is that sort of in the food chain, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, again, I would say process visibility would be my first take. I would say for LDAP, it's a little more about known tools, like known attack tools that red teamers or hackers are using, and just general kind of visibility. But it's a very noisy thing. Like think about, it's designed for everyone to talk to it, to say, hey, tell me all your users, tell me all the people in this group. When you're typing somebody's name in Outlook, like it is querying LDAP with every keystroke to say, tell me all the usernames that start with B, E, C, K. And so like it's meant to be, it's a very chatty thing in general. That's why a lot of tools kind of stay away from it because it's so much data to go through.
That makes a lot of sense. So there's, what are we going to do? What is the next step of this? I mean, we know that this is a blind spot. We know that we need to get to it. What is the takeaway that you hope that the cybersecurity community takes from your research? Yeah,
so I mean, the first takeaway is, hey, if you don't have visibility into this data source, like you need to, like put it on your roadmap, make sure that you're working towards getting this visibility. Secondly, if you have that visibility, know that it's a lot more complicated than just these very simple kind of like string-based detections. Because again, as I mentioned, if you Google like threat hunting and LDAP, you'll find a lot of detections that are pretty simple. They're effective today because I think a lot of attackers know many people aren't looking at LDAP, so they don't need to try that hard. I don't need to speak in code if my parents aren't listening in, but if I know people are listening in, okay, now let's come up with our own code language that we can talk and know what we're saying, but no one else knows. And so our focus for this research was draw attention to the data source, but then say once you're there, things are not always as they appear. So again, don't expect to see, if a tool was written to say, issue a query that says name equals Becky, then, well, they could also say name equals BE wildcard and name equals wildcard CKY. Together, that logically is going to find all the objects with the name of Becky, but now it's split up into two different pieces. That's a very simple example of splitting things up into small places.
Say that again. Okay, so I know it's a simple example, but I do need it repeated. Okay, so explain that again.
Yeah, so so if I had an attack tool that was looking for people named Becky, right? Yeah. And there are very specific strings that people will look that these tools will look for, like curb TGT or service principal name, all this kind of stuff. But let's take a very specific value. I can issue a query that says name equals Becky. I send that to LDAP, that's what shows up in logs. So if people know this is a sensitive thing, let's write a detection that says name equals Becky, oh, that's this tool. Okay. Well, as an attacker, if I understand very simply, I can break Becky up into multiple smaller pieces and all those things together, then it's still going to give me the exact result I want, but it's going to look nothing like what people are expecting to see. There's lots of different techniques, like you can hex encode characters, so instead of saying BECKY, I can say /62 for B. I can say /63 for C. So these are all just a bunch of nerd speak of different ways that you can represent characters that don't even look like what we'd expect to see written down as an alpha character. Wow. So, yeah. Well, I have learned a lot today. I want to thank you so much for walking me through that. Absolutely. Tell our audience where they can check out your briefing and learn more about your work. Yeah. So we did the briefing yesterday. It's the tool is called maladaptive. That's a play on words for maladaptive because it's actually quite flexible. And so it's on our GitHub, github.com/maladaptive. We spent over 2,000 hours on this research, which is too much time. It's too much time to spend on one topic, but we're really excited to get it out there. And one more note I would say is that in this research, we had to write our own full custom parser for LDAP because one didn't exist that was open source. We wrote the detection framework, deobfuscation framework, obfuscation framework, and as defenders, so my co-speaker, her name is Sabayate Elizai. We're both defenders, and so we said, let's present all this information and let's release everything except for the obfuscation part. And we've submitted a talk later this year to release the obfuscation part. We want to give defenders at least the 4-month window to get their data sources together so they can be in a good spot to defend it. But we released all the detection rules, and we really hope that people enjoy it. So thank you for your time.
Daniel Bohannon, thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your work with us. It's much appreciated.